I should have seen it coming, honestly. Looking back, it was obvious. My family had always been the type to take more than they gave, to act like generosity was a one-way street paved only when it benefited them. But at the time, I still believed in the idea of family, in the illusion that we looked out for each other. So when I hit a rough patch, I turned to them. Losing my job wasn't the end of the world, but it sure felt like it. The savings I had wouldn't last forever, and rent was chewing through them fast. I needed a solution, at least something temporary, and that's when I made the mistake of reaching out to my mother, Margaret. She didn't hesitate, of course. "Sarah, come home for a bit. Get back on your feet," she said. I should have known better. At first, it sounded reasonable. The house was old, practically falling apart in places. "You can stay rent-free," she told me, "if you help us fix things up a little." It wasn't a big deal. I had some experience with renovations, and the room I was supposed to move into needed work anyway. Win-win, right? So, like an idiot, I agreed. The job that became my life the moment I arrived, I realized a little was an understatement. The walls were cracked, the floor creaked with every step, and the door barely hung on its hinges. The entire hallway leading to the room was a disaster. Paint peeling, wood rotting, lighting barely functional. I got to work immediately. Mornings stretched into late nights, dust coating my skin, sweat dripping into my eyes. I ripped out old carpets, installed fresh flooring, repainted everything, and even built shelves into the walls. The hallway needed even more. Light fixtures, patching up the ceiling, fixing unstable floorboards. At first, I used what materials were lying around, but as the job grew, it became clear that if I wanted it done right, I'd have to buy most of the supplies myself. And my parents? They didn't offer a dime. I told myself it didn't matter. It wasn't about the money, it was about securing a space for myself, investing in something that would finally feel like mine. Over time, I spent $3,700 in flooring, paint, wood, tools, everything. I didn't track the exact number too closely. In my mind, it was worth it, until the day it wasn't. The day I finished everything, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: pride. Standing in the doorway of my newly renovated room, I took it all in fresh paint, smooth floors, built-in shelves perfectly aligned. I had transformed this once rotting space into something beautiful, something that felt like mine. Then my mother, Margaret, called me into the living room. She was standing beside my father, Richard, who had that blank, unreadable expression he always wore whenever he was about to back up whatever nonsense she was about to say. My brother, Tom, wasn't there. He never was, not unless he had something to gain. I sat down, waiting, expecting at the very least some form of acknowledgement for the weeks of back-breaking work one had just put in, maybe even a simple "thank you, Sarah." But instead, Margaret smiled tight, forced, rehearsed. "We've decided that Tom is going to take the room," she said. I blinked. "What?" Richard sighed, like he was the one being inconvenienced. "It just makes more sense. He needs the space more than you do." I laughed, because what else could I do? Tom already has his own place. He lives with his boyfriend in a perfectly good apartment. He hasn't even been around to help. Margaret shrugged. He's been thinking about moving back for a while. This was just good timing. I looked between them, searching for some sign that this was a joke, some flicker of hesitation, guilt, second-guessing. But no, they were dead serious. I glanced toward the room I had poured nearly 2 months of my life into, the one I had sunk $3,700 of my own money into, and now, just like that, it wasn't mine. My first instinct was to argue, to demand they pay me back at the very least. But deep down, I knew them, knew how this would go. I'd get nothing, so I didn't say a word. I just stood up, walked to my half-packed bags in the living room because I hadn't even had the luxury of sleeping in that room yet, and started shoving everything inside. I could feel them watching me, expecting me to yell, to fight, to beg. Maybe they even wanted me to, so they could act like I was overreacting. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I grabbed my things, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked straight out the front door. No goodbyes, no second chances. I left them behind without a second thought. And in 48 hours, they were going to regret everything. That first night away from home, I parked outside a 24-hour gas station and sat there in silence. The reality of what had just happened hadn't fully settled in yet. One moment, I had a plan, a place to stay, a way to get back on my feet. The next, I was homeless. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, exhaling slowly. I should have seen this coming. I did see it coming, didn't I? There were always signs. Margaret and Richard had never been the kind of parents who thought of anyone but themselves. And Tom? He was their golden child, the one who never had to lift a damn finger because he knew someone else would always clean up after him. I just never thought they'd go this far. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pressing down on me like a weight. My body ached from weeks of nonstop labor, and now I didn't even have a bed to sleep in. I refused to spend money on a motel that would be admitting defeat, so I reclined my seat and slept right there in my truck, outside that gas station. It wasn't comfortable, but at least it was mine. A helping hand. By morning, I knew I needed a plan. My savings were already low, and I wasn't about to waste what little I had on temporary solutions. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. Most of my friends lived too far away, and the few who were nearby either had families or roommates, not exactly ideal for a couch surfer. Then I thought of Anna. We used to work together before she switched jobs, but we'd always stayed in touch. She was the type of person who didn't pry, who just helped when you needed it. I hesitated for a moment before finally calling her. "Hey," she answered almost immediately. "Sarah, everything okay?" I forced a laugh. Not really. I kind of need a place to crash for a bit." Anna didn't even pause. "Come over. Stay as long as you need." Just like that, no questions, no conditions. An hour later, I was knocking on her door. She pulled me inside, handed me a beer, and flopped onto the couch beside me like nothing was out of the ordinary. "Do I even want to ask?" she finally said, raising an eyebrow. I exhaled. Let's just say, my family pulled some classic screw Sarah over nonsense, and now I'm done with them. Anna smirked. "Sounds about right." She clinked her bottle against mine. "Screw them then." I smiled for the first time in days. 48 hours later, everything changed. I had just started settling in at Anna's place when my phone exploded with notifications. First a couple of missed calls from Richard, then Margaret, then Tom. Weird! I ignored them at first, but the texts kept coming. "You need to fix this now, Richard." "Sarah, please just call us Margaret." "What the hell did you do, Tom? What the hell was going on?" Then a message popped up from my cousin, Chris. "Dude, what did you do? Your parents are freaking out." I frowned and quickly texted back. "What are you talking about?" Chris's response came almost instantly. "They won't tell me, but your dad's talking about getting lawyers involved." WTF? Lawyers? For what? I hadn't done anything. I hadn't taken a single thing when I left. I hadn't trashed the place. I hadn't retaliated in any way. I sat back, staring at my phone, trying to piece it together. And then, slowly, it hit me. It wasn't about what I had done. It was about what I had left behind. Karma hits like a freight train. I shot another text to Chris. "Okay, seriously, what's going on?" His reply nearly made me choke on my drink. "Your brother showed up to move in and lost his damn mind. Your parents are panicking. Your mom's crying, your dad's calling contractors. Apparently, the house stinks." I blinked. "Stinks?" "Yeah, like really bad. Your brother said it smells like something died in there." I burst out laughing. Anna looked over, confused. What's so funny?" I was laughing so hard I could barely get the words out. "The house, the one I just spent months renovating, it reeks. She frowned. Why? I grinned, shaking my head. Because I told them we needed to replace the subfloor under the hallway and bedroom. There was water damage, probably mold, but Richard said it was too expensive and made me put new flooring over it instead. Anna's jaw dropped. Oh my God, she whispered. I nodded, still grinning. Now, 2 days later, all that moisture is trapped under the flooring, and it's probably turning into full-blown rot. Anna clapped a hand over her mouth, laughing. They did it to themselves. Yep. I leaned back, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For once, I didn't have to do a damn thing to get even. They had completely and utterly screwed themselves over. The desperation begins. By the next morning, the texts from my mom had taken a dramatic shift. Gone was the passive-aggressive guilt-tripping. Now she was begging. Sarah, please, we didn't realize how bad the damage was. Your dad is overwhelmed. If you could just come back and help, we would really appreciate it. I wasn't stupid. They didn't give a damn about me, they just needed me to fix their mess. A few hours later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Tom. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. Sarah, he said immediately. Listen, I know you're mad, but this is serious. The house is basically unlivable. There's mold or something under the floors. I can't move in until it's fixed, I smirked. Not my problem, Tom, he exhaled sharply. Dad's willing to work something out with you. Can you just come look at it? Oh, now they wanted to work something out, after they had thrown me out like garbage. But something about the way he said it made me curious. I wanted to see it. I wanted to stand there and watch them panic. So I told him, fine, I'll come by, but I'm not promising anything. Anna shot me a look. You're really going to go back there? I smirked. Oh yeah, I wouldn't miss this for the world, and I meant it. I pulled into the driveway a couple of hours later, taking my sweet time getting out of the truck. Richard was already outside, pacing back and forth, hands on his hips, his usual I'm in charge stance. But this time, he looked rattled. The moment he saw me, his face lit up like I was some long-lost savior. Sarah, good to see you, he said, his voice forced, trying for casual but landing somewhere between desperate and fake enthusiasm. Come take a look inside. I didn't respond, just raised an eyebrow and strolled past him through the front door. And holy hell, the smell hit me like a punch to the face. It was even worse than I imagined, thick, damp, rotten, like something had been festering under the floors for years. The air felt heavy, thick with moisture and decay, making my skin crawl. Tom stood in the doorway to the bedroom, arms crossed, looking absolutely miserable. I can't live here, he muttered, barely sparing me a glance. It smells disgusting. I bit back a smirk. Weird, it was fine a couple of days ago. Margaret and Richard followed me inside, trying their best to pretend. This was a normal situation, but their body language gave them away. Richard's forced calm, Margaret's shifting eyes, Tom's sulking posture. I walked farther into the hallway, pretending to examine the flooring, but I already knew exactly what the problem was. The moisture trapped underneath had turned into a full-blown mold infestation. To fix it, they'd have to rip everything out. The flooring I installed? Gone. The hallway repairs? Wasted. The shelves I built? Useless. It wasn't just one small fix anymore. It was an entire renovation all over again. The pathetic offer. Richard cleared his throat. So, here's what we're thinking. I turned, crossing my arms. Oh, this should be good. You come back, he said, smiling like he was doing me a favor. Help us tear this up, redo it properly, and his grin widened this time. We won't kick you out. I actually laughed a full-bodied, holy these people are delusional laugh. Margaret flinched, and even Tom looked uncomfortable. Let me get this straight, I said, wiping my eyes. You want me to do all of that work again, for free, so you can what? Let me stay in the house I already rebuilt? Richard's smile faltered. Well, when you say it like that, I held up a hand. No. His face darkened. Excuse me? I said no, Margaret stepped forward, trying to soften the situation. Sarah, be reasonable. We made a mistake. We should have handled things differently, but what's done is done. She sighed dramatically. Are you really going to let your family struggle when you can help? I smirked. That's funny. You didn't feel that way 2 days ago. Tom looked away. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. But Richard, he was still desperately clinging to control. We made a mistake, he admitted stiffly, but now we need to move forward. There's no point holding a grudge. I tilted my head. Oh, I'm not holding a grudge. I'm just not stupid enough to fall for this again. Richard's patience finally snapped, his voice sharpened, losing the fake charm. You owe us, Sarah, after everything we've done for you. I scoffed. Everything you've done for me? I gestured wildly around the room. I spent months rebuilding this place while you sat on your ass. I spent $3,700 of my own money while you refused to pay for anything, and then you kicked me out the second it suited you. Richard clenched his jaw. You're being dramatic. No, I said, stepping closer. I'm being smart for the first time. Margaret actually looked nervous. Sarah, please, we can fix this together. I smiled. No, you can fix this. And with that, I turned around and walked straight out the door, no yelling, no arguing, just done. The social media backlash. I barely made it back to Anna's before my phone started blowing up again. At first, I ignored it. But then Anna, scrolling on her phone, let out a laugh. Oh my God, she snorted, turning her screen toward me. Your mom just posted on Facebook. I frowned. What? She tilted her phone so I could read it, and there it was, a long, dramatic post from Margaret, dripping with passive-aggressive nonsense. It's heartbreaking when your own child turns their back on their family. We took her in when she was struggling, gave her food and shelter, and how does she repay us? By abandoning us in our time of need. Family should always come first. It's sad how selfish people have become these days. The comments were even worse. That's awful. Kids these days have no respect. You're such a good mom, Margaret. Stay strong. How could she do that to you? Anna snorted. Wow, she really went for the whole poor victim mom angle, huh? I rolled my eyes. Of course she did. It didn't take long for the text messages from relatives to start rolling in. Sarah, how could you do this to your parents? My aunt. I don't know what's going on, but you need to fix it. They're your family, my uncle. Why you do this? My grandma, who barely knows how to text. I sat rubbing my temples. Fantastic. Then my phone buzzed with a call from Chris. I picked up. Let me guess, you saw the post? Chris groaned. Yeah, and it's worse than you think. I frowned. How so? They're telling people you stole from them. I nearly dropped my phone. What? They're saying you left in the middle of renovations and took a bunch of important materials with you, tools, screws, whatever. That's why the house is falling apart. Anna's jaw dropped. Oh, that's bold. I let out a humorless laugh. They do realize I didn't take a damn thing, right? Chris sighed. I know, but that's not the point. They're trying to make you look like the bad guy, and people are eating it up. I leaned back against the couch, shaking my head. You know what? Chris hesitated. What? Nothing, I smirked. I'm not doing anything. Chris was silent for a beat. Seriously? Yep, I said, popping open a soda. They want to fight. They want me to react, not going to happen. Anna grinned. Damn, that's cold. I like it. Chris sighed. Well, don't be surprised if they try something else. He wasn't wrong, because less than 24 hours later, Richard showed up at my job, and I couldn't wait to hear what he had to say. The last thing I expected was for Richard to show up at my job. It had been less than a day since my mother's dramatic Facebook post, but apparently, the online pity party wasn't enough. Now they wanted to corner me in person. I was on break when I spotted him standing in the lobby, arms crossed, stiff posture, trying to act like he still had some kind of authority over me. I almost laughed. I sighed, walking over with zero enthusiasm. What are you doing here? We need to talk, Richard said, his voice low, serious. I already knew how this would go. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to pressure me, to manipulate me into fixing the mess they created. So I didn't even let him start. Save it, I said flatly. I'm not coming back. I'm not fixing anything. I'm done. His jaw tightened. Sarah, you're being unreasonable. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, am I? He exhaled sharply. Your mother is sick over this. She hasn't slept since you left, I scoffed. That's funny. She slept just fine after kicking me out. Richard ignored that. She just wants her family back together, he said, his voice softening like he actually thought I'd fall for this. We all do, but you've put us in an impossible situation. Do you really think this is fair? I stared at him. Fair? Now he wanted to talk about fair? I folded my arms, tilting my head. All right, let's talk about fair. Richard shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't expecting me to actually challenge him. Fair, I continued, would have been letting me move into the room I renovated. Fair would have been respecting the work one did instead of throwing me out the second I was done. Fair would have been not lying about me online, making me look like some ungrateful thief. Richard's expression darkened. We only did that because you forced our hand. I laughed. I forced your hand? You screwed yourselves over, and now you're looking for someone else to blame. He sighed, rubbing his forehead like I was the difficult one here. Look, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to fix this. Let's just come up with a solution. There is no solution, I said simply. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Richard's expression shifted, his confidence wavered. Just for a second, because he finally saw it in my face, I wasn't budging. He had no power over me anymore. His voice lowered, trying one last time. Sarah, we're still your family. I gave him a slow, cold smile. No, I said. You're just people I used to know. Richard opened his mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. And that was it, no yelling, no drawn-out fight, just done. Truly free. A week later, I changed my number and blocked all of them. I found a new apartment small, but mine and I moved on. For a while, my cousin Chris kept me updated. He told me how Richard and Margaret were still playing the victim, telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned them for no reason, how they were still blaming me for the house falling apart, even though it was their own damn fault. At some point, I told Chris to stop giving me updates because I didn't care anymore. I had spent years bending over backward for people who wouldn't do the same for me. I had given them everything, my time, my effort, my savings, only for them to throw me out like I meant nothing. But now I was free. No more guilt, no more obligations, no more family who only saw me as a tool. And you know what? It felt amazing.